1986, I've been talking about chastity to anybody who invites me to talk to them. That we started this program for fathers and sons and mothers and daughters about 18 years ago. And I want to say, I think I'm looking at some of the meanest dads in the world. The past couple of weeks, we looked at the meanest moms in the world. Because, and I say that in the best sense of the word, you're mean, or your kids might think you're mean, and that's such a compliment to you. Because what you want to do is protect your children. Protect your children from all the kinds of things that are around them that can snatch them away from being healthy, holy, and the children of God that God committed to you to raise up for Him. And so, by being the meanest dads in the world, you are really helping yourselves live out your call to be the father you were created to be. We're going to start with a prayer from Cardinal Newman, and this prayer is available on the table. I'd like us to reflect on 3 themes in that prayer. I have my mission, I shall be a bond of connection between persons, and I shall be an angel of peace and a preacher of truth. So those are the 3 themes: mission, bond of connection, angel of peace, preacher of truth. And this presentation hopefully will unpack that and what it means for our lives and how does that fit in. You're living out your lives in your mission in the male body God has given you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. God has created me to do Him some definite service. He has committed some work to me which He has not committed to another. I have my mission. I may never know it in this life, but I will be told it in the next. I am a link in a chain, a bond of connection between persons. He has not created me for naught. I shall do good. I shall do His work. I shall be an angel of peace and a preacher of truth in my own place if I do but keep His commandments. Therefore I shall trust Him. If I am in sickness, my sickness may serve Him. In perplexity, my perplexity may serve Him. If in sorrow, my sorrow may serve Him. He does nothing in vain. I will say yes to His call. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. I have my mission. I'm going to be bold enough to say this, because I know everybody's mission who's ever been created, who's living now, and whoever will be created. And the only reason I can say that is because it's the same for everybody. Our mission is a simple 4-letter word. It's to love. But it takes a nanosecond to say that, and it takes a lifetime to live that out. And those who love, then, are lovers. So we are to become lovers in the most authentic sense of the word. But our culture has taken a lie and use the word love for that lie. And so when we hear the word lover now in 2004, we think of all sorts of vulgar, profane ways of using the body in a way God never intended it to be. But God has called us to be lovers, and if that's our mission, and that's what we're going to be accountable for at the particular judgment, we better figure out, what does it mean now at your age, young men, and even the dads here, and myself too, what does it mean to be a lover in the truest, most authentic sense of the word? And Peter and Jerry and Ryan have all touched on that, and I hope I'll give you a little bit of a different perspective that it'll all come together. But some of you probably have the same catechism I did when you were in 2nd grade. You were going to receive your first communion, and that was a very good catechism. We had to answer questions and reply to them with our memorized response. The first question was, who made you? And the answer, of course, was, God made me. Very good. Well, why did God make you? God made me to know, love, and serve Him in this life so I could be happy forever with Him in the next. God made me to know, love, and serve Him in this life so I could be happy with Him forever in the next. Well, when I think about that in the next, well, first of all, it takes just a few seconds to say that also, but it takes a lifetime to live out those simple words, to know God, to love God, to serve God in this life. And then he talks about, so I could be happy with Him forever in the next. And I was at one point reading a few paragraphs of one of the Holy Father's documents. I believe it was Veritatis Splendor, and he talked about the earth being the penultimate reality. Well, I'm a language freak. I love words. I'm a language pathologist. I work with people who have problems with language and communication. And so when I come to a new word, it's like the mother lode. I've discovered something. So I said, penultimate? I took 4 years of Latin. I know what ultimate means. It comes from ultimo in the Latin. It means final, end point, last place, the destination. But what in the world does penultimate mean? So, you're going to learn some vocabulary here. I went to the dictionary and I found out penultimate means next to the last. So the Holy Father said, this earth is the penultimate reality. Oh, to know, love, and serve him in this life, penultimate reality, so I can be happy with him forever in the next, the ultimate destination of this pilgrimage that the Holy Father said. What is a pilgrimage? A journey to a holy place. Well, if we put it in those terms and what comes in the ultimate reality, that holy place, of course, is heaven. So it's a journey to heaven. But with a journey, if you don't have the map and then you don't follow the map, you can end up in all sorts of wrong places. And that's what happens with our fallen human nature, especially when we deal with this word of love. What does it mean to be a lover in this body that I have? So Cardinal Newman says in the prayer, I have my mission. I may never know it in this life, but I shall be told it in the next, the ultimate reality. Now, in our Catholic theology, we know that when we die, the minute we die, we have a particular judgment. It's me and God, you and God. Nobody else is there. And God is not going to ask any of us, how many friends did you have? What kind of sports teams were you on? What class were they? What was your bank account like? What vacations did you take? Those aren't the questions he's going to ask. The only question for our life is going to be, did you become a lover? Did you love as I love? And he'll say that with anticipation. Did you? Because he created me and he created you for that ultimate destination, which is in heaven with him. And he'll look at me, and what if I look back at him and I say, did I become a lover? I sure did. There were drinks to drink and beds to sleep in that weren't my spouse's. Yes, I sure became a lover. And he'll weep. Say, not the lie. Celeste, did you give yourself to others regardless of the personal cost to you? Did you? That's what I created you for. I created you to be for others what I am. To be my lips, my words, my arms, my legs for them. Did you do it? Oh, now I get it. At the particular judgment, that's not the thing we can say because we've already made our decision. It's not that God decides where we spend our ultimate reality. We do. By all the moral decisions we make every day. And by the time you reach the age of reason, which our Catholic faith says is about 7 years old, you are making moral decisions. Those decisions that separate you, the light from the darkness, the truth from the lie, the yes from the no, the God from eternal damnation. So let's go back, and Peter did a great job of talking about going back to the beginning. Let's go back even before Adam and Eve and talk about the angels. The first of God's creatures were these angels. They were spirits. They were like God, though. They were the imago Dei because they had a mind and a will. And I point here to the mind. In God, love and truth, they're the same thing. He is love. He is truth. But in us, there's a separation. There's mind and a will. So he created these angels, and they had a mind and will like God. Because God is truth, their mind could know the truth. God is love. And for us creatures, love is not only knowing the truth, but then doing it. So it's knowing and then doing. In God, there's no separation. And so he created the angels. And the most magnificent of all the angels was Lucifer. And that also comes from the Latin meaning light bearer. Lucis means light, fair means carry or bear. Lucifer. And you might be sitting there thinking, Lucifer, but he's the devil. But yes, but he wasn't always what we considered the devil. He was the most magnificent of God's angels. Why God made him like that, I don't know. But he made him this magnificent spirit. And God gave all the angels only one order. He was the creator. He knew what was best for his creatures. And I like to think about in our human lives, like I drive a Subaru. Now the Subaru people want me to keep buying a Subaru. So they want their Subaru to work the best it can. And so they say, put gas in the car. The better the gas, the better. And then I get tired. Now gas, I just paid $1.71 a gallon. And I say, hey, that's for the birds. I don't want to pay $1.71 a gallon. I know my Subaru dealer. I know the Subaru manufacturer says I need to put gas in the car. But I'm going to make up my own rules. So the Creator told me what to do, so the thing works. And I say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take the garden hose, turn on the water, and put it into my tank. The hose fits right in there. Turn on the water, fill up my tank. Water kind of splashes out, tank's full. Close the tank. Of course my car isn't going to work. But is it Subaru's fault? No. I violated the rules of the Creator. And I have to suffer with the consequences. Let's go back to Lucifer. The one rule God gave said, obey me. Worship me. The same thing. Bow down before me and obey me. But now God had given them a mind and a will. So they were like God. And they knew they were to obey their Creator. And Lucifer looks around and his pride filled him and he said, I cannot bow down before someone. No, no, no. Look at all these. I'm more magnificent than all these other angels. I'm going to sit right next to God and they will bow down before both of us. That'll be all right. But that's not what God had said. That was not God's plan. And so Lucifer went right up to God and he said, non serviam. I will not serve you. I want to sit right next to you and have everyone bow down and worship both of us. And there were many other angels that used their mind to know God's purpose and then used their will as a won't. They didn't say, I will. They said, I won't. Non serviam. And then God probably wept. It's not that God threw them out of heaven. They chose to leave. They could not live there if they were not going to obey the Creator. And so they left, and this now separates eternity into the two places. The place of God Himself, who is truth and who is love. And St. Thomas Aquinas has given us 3 beautiful ways to reflect on God, His attributes. The good, the true, and the beautiful. Heaven is the place of the ultimate good, the ultimate true, and the ultimate beautiful. And now we have the place in eternity of the 4 Ds. I don't call it hell, I call it the place of the 4 Ds. The place of despair, disease, destruction, and death. Despair, disease, destruction, and death. And so we have despair, there is no hope. Disease, there is no cure for what is wrong with you. Destruction, everything is annihilated. And death, there is no hope for any kind of life at all. Despair, disease, destruction, and death. So now eternity is divided into 2 places, and that is why all of our moral decisions are very important to know where to decide where we're going to spend our ultimate reality. In the place of the good, the true, and the beautiful, the ultimate end of the holy pilgrimage, or the place of despair, disease, destruction, and death, God doesn't put us there. We put ourselves there by our moral choices. And so here's Satan. He says, non serviam Lucifer, and he said, I will not serve you. The minute he said that, there's God. The angels were to be the imago Dei, the image of God. We are called to be the imago Dei, the image of God. The minute Lucifer said that, the mirrors went up in front of him. And now, does he see God? When you have a mirror in front of you, what do you see? Self. He saw himself. And now, instead of imago Dei, he becomes imago Mei. Image of myself. That's who I see. I want it all for me. It is all about me. And God is obscured. Of course He's there. He's there for all eternity, but He's obscured as long as those mirrors are separating Lucifer and all the angels from Him and separating us from Him. So then we fast forward and we go into the Garden of Eden and we have Adam and Eve making that choice too. Instead of saying, I will obey you, serviam, they said, I won't. So where there's a will, there's a won't. And I point to here because this is where we think of love residing. And what is love? Love is really taking what we know to be true and actually doing it. So it can't just stay up here as an intellectual endeavor. It goes out to other people. Yeah, I know I'm supposed to tithe money. So I get an allowance of $5 a week. Well, 50 cents of that money goes to somebody else, or maybe I accumulate it and every year I give a donation somewhere. Yeah, I know it, but am I doing it? That's where the love comes in. And some of you might have taken algebra already. Not algebra, geometry. The algebra is coming up. Geometry, and you know about syllogisms. A syllogism is set up like this. If A equals B, and B equals C, sorry, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. We all learned that in geometry. Well, here's a syllogism for the definition of love. And if we're all called to be lovers, we better figure out what it means to love. If A equals B, there is no love without sacrifice. So somehow love equals sacrifice. B equals C. There is no sacrifice without suffering. A equals C. There is no love without some element of suffering in it. And you're not going to hear that on the current songs on the radio, or on MTV, or in the movies like American Pie. There's never going to be any kind of syllogism like that defining love. There is no love without sacrifice. There is no sacrifice without suffering. So there is no love without some kind of suffering. Why? Because love means it's all about you. I have my needs, urges, drives, desires, and passions, and they're good. God gave them to me. But if you are in my life, I am present to your needs, and they take more importance than my needs. And so we have an element of this suffering and sacrifice. We know what's true, and we actually do it. Now, God speaks to us as a group at church and individually. So we know what's true. And then we're supposed to go out and do it. And you see this y-axis, God to me. You see the x-axis, this is the algebra, me to others. God to me to others. And what happens with the x and y-axis? They intersect, and what do they form? They form the symbol of the most perfect lover ever. Jesus Christ made this perfect intersection, and that is how we are to live our lives, in this perfect intersection of bringing God to others. Now, when we were baptized, we received 3 gifts: priest, prophet, and king. Now, I look at this room full of men. Those of you who aren't married, well, actually, even if you are married and your spouses would die, you would be able to become priests. But I look at my female body when I speak to the women. Oh, great, Jesus Christ, God gives 3 great gifts at baptism. Great, 3, can you imagine? God gives gifts. Priest, 50% of his creation can't even use that gift. Prophet, and then you think, oh, well, what's a prophet? A prophet is one who brings the truth to others. As Cardinal Newman said, if I be a preacher of truth in my own place. Well, Lent is coming up. We know. What happened to the prophets? They got blown off. They got killed. They got thrown out of town. They got spoken bad about, scandalously, slander, and so forth. Oh, that's a nice gift to give someone. Here, I'm giving you a great gift, and nobody will be your friend. That's another gift. So 50% of his creation can't use one of his gifts. The other gift, who wants it? And king, come on, God. We don't live in a monarchy anymore. I know. It's 2004. We don't know anything about kings. Great. 3 useless gifts that God gives us at baptism. And of course, I'm saying that facetiously because we have to go and unpack those a little more so we can live out those gifts, because he gave them to us to help us become the lovers he created us to be. To help us to learn how to love involving sacrifice and suffering. To be a priest. He's not talking about the ministerial priesthood, the priesthood of the clerical priesthood. He's talking about the priesthood of the faithful. That includes everybody who created. All of us. We are all the faithful. The priesthood, and what does a priest do? He brings God, or she brings God to others. Brings God to others. Priesthood. Prophet. Be a preacher of truth in your own place. Stand up for what is right and what is true. Now, it's very important to understand, not all issues are moral issues. And there's a little example I have to illustrate that. In the parking lot of one of the schools I worked at, there was a car that said, "Don't believe in abortion, don't have one." And I looked at that bumper sticker and I thought, dang, that's right. You don't believe in abortion, don't have one. I don't believe in abortion, and I'm not going to have one. But what do I say that's so pithy? What do I say to somebody if they say that to me in a little conversation? I always try to prepare myself for these conversations that might occur. And I just couldn't figure out a good way to respond to that. Well, I have received confirmation. Some of you young men probably here have too, or you're going to pretty soon. And we get 7 gifts there. Wisdom, understanding, counsel, knowledge, piety, fear of the Lord, and fortitude. And I can say them so fast because I remember by WUCK, W-U-C-K, PIFF, P-F-F, not P-I-F-F, P-F-F. WUCK, wisdom, understanding, counsel, knowledge, W-U-C-K, piety, fear of the Lord, and fortitude. And if God gave us those gifts, we better know what they are so we can use them because He gave them to us to help us. So I have WUCK, PIFF going in me. And I'm saying, okay, what do I say to that bumper sticker? I'm driving home. And the Holy Spirit, the wisdom, the gift of wisdom starts to emerge and to flare up. And I say, okay, and the Holy Spirit says to me, Celeste, St. Thomas Aquinas gave us a really good thing to do to reduce an argument to the absurd. Okay, I've heard that before. So what does that mean? Well, Celeste, the father of lies is taking what is evil and trying to make it look true. And he is taking what is evil by making personal preferences and taking them into the moral area. For instance, Celeste, if you take that issue, don't believe in abortion, don't have one, and put it into another moral area, see what happens. See, having an abortion is not like ordering sausage or pepperoni on your pizza, Celeste. It's not like wearing your pants or your skirt to work. Those are personal preferences, and I don't have to confess them in confession. Bless me, Father, for I've sinned. I ordered a sausage pizza on Tuesday, and I shouldn't have. I should have ordered the pepperoni. And the priest would say, what? What are you talking about? That's a personal preference. That has nothing to do with a sin. You're not going to go to hell because of those things. So this is what the father of lies has. You don't feel like doing something? Don't do it. So what do? Put it in another moral area. I say, all right, I could go to this person who has that bumper sticker on their car, and I could say, excuse me, I've been challenged by your bumper sticker, and I just want to tell you, I will never have an abortion. I don't believe in it. And they might be very smug and say, well, I do, so I'm going to, or I did, or whatever. And then I say, but wait, there's something more. I believe in adultery. So if some weekend your husband doesn't come home, don't worry. He's in good hands. Because you don't believe in abortion, and you're not going to have one, and you believe in abortion, and you might have one, and I don't. But I believe in adultery. So I'm just going to carry on an adulterous relationship, and you might not believe in that, so you don't have to worry about it. But I am with your husband. And of course, that would be totally unacceptable. Why? Because I've reduced that argument to the absurd, and I've put it into a much more personal context for this woman or this person who drives this car who's rather blinded to the truth in this one area. And oftentimes you can think you're blinded to the truth in a certain area because you actually are guilty of that very thing. So sometimes when these people are so strong in one area against what the truth is, it might be because they're struggling with that. So this woman would say, what do you mean? Keep your hands off my husband. I said, what? No problem. I believe in adultery. So that's okay. But do you see how we reduce the argument? It's not a matter of relativity anymore. There are certain rules that are imprinted on everyone's heart, regardless of creed, regardless of any time that they were born. And this is one of those rules. Thou shalt not murder is another one of those rules. So we have the Adam and Eve in the garden. And Adam and Eve have eaten the apple. Concupiscence came in the world, disordered passion. And believe me, passion is good. It gives us the enthusiasm to do what needs to be done. But disordered passion will lead you to despair, disease, destruction, and death. Because what happens is that if you let the passion take over your ability to say yes to God, then the passion rules you instead of you ruling the passion. And the scales are tipped the wrong way. And Adam and Eve found this out, and they felt this shame. And Adam didn't want to use Eve's body, even though he felt like it now. And Eve was thinking, oh, I could seduce him. I could use my body to seduce him, and then I could get power over him in a psychological, emotional way. And so what did they do? They covered up the very parts of their body that made them male and female. Now, they didn't cover up their earlobes or their elbows or their kneecaps. They covered up the parts of the body we called the genitals. Why? Because those were the very specific parts of the body that God gave to Adam and Eve to speak this exquisite language of love in the covenant of marriage, to image God himself, who is the Father, the Son, and the love between them is so strong. We have another person, the Holy Spirit. The mother, the father, and 9 months later that love became Celeste. That love was Celeste in the world. So they covered up these parts of the body that were to be most mysterious, most sacred. And we do that still. We veil what is sacred. I like to use that word veil. They veiled what was sacred. Not the parts of the body they shared, but the parts of the body that made them male and female. Why? Because they wanted to preserve the sanctity of that sacredness. And if something is exposed for all the world to see 24/7, 365, or this year 66 days a year, it no longer is special. And when you take something that should be sacred, expose it to the world, and constantly, constantly use it to sell things and to make it available to be used, it'll be used and abused and ultimately destroyed. And I would suggest that's what's happened to these images of God created, to the male and female body, especially the female body. The veils have been torn off. I'm just telling you, I'm warning you. The Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition has come out. I saw it yesterday at the grocery store. That is no place for your eyes to be looking. I, as a woman, am terribly insulted by that. Insulted because it reduces who I am to a what, to a part, or to some parts. And then those parts aren't adequate enough. I better lose 20 pounds. I better do something about my body so that it looks more perfect. Well, those are airbrush papered babes anyway. They don't even look like that in real life. They're fake. Why? Because they come from the father of lies. Everything he says is a dirty, rotten, stinking, putrid, slimy lie and can only lead you to one place, the place of despair, disease, destruction, and death. So, be the men and the young men God called you to be, especially with this filth that's surfacing in our environment all the time. Protect your eyes from that. And it's hard because it's always put at the eye level of the young people. And if you get that magazine, get rid of it. And you know what? Don't just throw it away. Destroy it. Rip it. Throw it in the fire. That's what I do with all the catalogs that I get that are what I consider pornographic. I rip them up and I put them in my fire or put them in my shredder because I heard about Ted Bundy. He was executed for all these terrible crimes he did to young women. He raped and murdered many women. And at the end he said, his addiction to pornography started when he was 8 or 9 years old. And what happened? He was going around in the dumpster around his house and he found somebody's collection of Playboy magazines. They are intact in a dumpster. And because he didn't have whatever it was, the training he needed, didn't know that he should run, didn't know that this was a real trap, he took those magazines and looked at, and first, just as Peter said, you look at something, it's just one little look. That's what Satan will. He's not going to come like the lion. Just one little look. And in our Catholic theology, it's called the near occasion of sin. And this is what it sounds like. Just this once. Mom and Dad will never find out. Everybody's doing it. Everybody will make fun of me if I don't do it just once. Oh, come on. This couldn't possibly be wrong. Look at the people that say it's okay. That's what the near occasion of sin sounds like. That's Satan hissing at us, like he hissed at Eve. And her first mistake was that she turned when he hissed. Well, the first mistake is that, and that's the near occasion of sin, and it gives Satan a chance to put his slimy claws in our ears and his slimy claws around our eyes. And now all of a sudden the truth is obscured. It's still there, of course, but for us, we can't see or hear it so well. And then come the rationalizations. Oh, it's all right. Nobody will ever find out. And then, because our hearts weren't created to do evil, they were created for the good, the true, and the beautiful, we have to rationalize what is bad to make it seem okay, to make it seem like it's not going to be something that's going to harm us. We have to rationalize it. So then, Eve turned to the devil and she said, but God told us not to eat of the fruit of this tree. Mistake number 2, you never engage in a conversation with the devil. The minute you hear that hiss, you get out of there as fast as you can. Because he's the father of lies, and everything that comes from his mouth is a dirty, rotten, stinking, putrid, slimy lie. And it leads us only to that place of the 4 Ds. It can never, ever lead anywhere else. And so, just like with those magazines, just like with those pictures that are all over that seduce your eyes and make you think the veils have been torn off a female body, and then it makes one think of using instead of loving. And so, what goes in your eyes will eventually come out your behavior. And so, Adam and Eve said, yes, it's okay, just this once. And immediately they knew they were naked and they felt shame. And then Peter talked about the 6th and the 9th commandment. I'm not going to go through that, but I do want to just say one thing. When we talk about covet, it's evil, bad things having to do with misuse of the human body in a sexual way going on in your mind. It's sexual fantasy. And men and women and boys and girls are created far differently in that area. And that's why, you know, I'm going to tell you something. Girls don't realize, women don't realize what we're doing to guys, to men, with the way we dress when we show off body parts that really should be veiled. We think we look cute. But of course, what's the word used? Sexy, hot. Hot, what does that mean? That has nothing to do with this. There is no love without sacrifice and sacrifice without suffering. Hot means your body is doing something to me, and I want to use those parts of your body that are going to gratify me. It's all about me. And that's what, and the girls just think, we look cute. Well, the reason I learned all about that is because there are many wonderful, honest men that have come up to me in the 18 years I've been doing presentations to talk to me about their sexual addictions, to talk to me about how women have no idea what their clothing or lack thereof is doing, what kind of language it's speaking, and how difficult it is making it for men in the workplace and just outside in the world at all. Teachers having to deal with girls in high school dressed in these ways that show off what they are instead of veiling what they are to reveal who they are. And after all, with those nasty pictures that go in your, are you thinking about the personality of that person? No. If the person has been turned into a thing, and a thing is to be used, and a person is always to be loved, regardless of the personal cost. And so we have these commandments. The 9th commandment, thou shalt not covet. Don't put the garbage in your mind, because eventually it will come out in your behavior in one way or another. Those dirty jokes will come out in behavior, acting it out, or speaking it out. You get the vile email, and somebody has sent you something that's really a filthy kind of pornographic letter or whatever. Do you send it on? That's also coming out in your behavior. It goes in, it comes out. The moral issue is not that somebody sent you something you didn't ask for. You had no decision in that. The moral issue starts with the receiving of it. Do you even click on open? Or do you delete it? Do you tell your parents, hey, there's a bunch of stuff on there that you better get rid of before I go in there? That's what it means to be a preacher of truth and an angel of peace in your own place. And that's also what it means to be a bond of connection between persons. My friend doesn't allow her children to have individual email accounts. And she was opening up letters that came to the family. And so the kids all have, if their kids send, if their her kids' friends send letters, they all have to come to this general family email account. So my friend opens up the letter. It's this vile pornographic commentary. Well, she, and obviously this young man, I think it was probably 8th grade or freshman in high school, had sent that out to his address list. Well, my friend, she said, okay. She printed a hard copy of it. She addressed an envelope to this young man's mother, who she knew. And then she confronted the young man. And she said, don't you ever think that you can infect and invade the privacy of our home with that filth that you sent across the email. Don't you ever do that. You have degraded not only my daughter, but everybody else you sent this to. And furthermore, you're going to need to discuss this with your mother and father because I have sent them a copy of what you forwarded to my daughters. Well, if my friends telling the young man don't ever do it again didn't get his attention, it sure got his attention when she said, it's in the mail to your parents. How do you think that guy felt? Oh, great, I can't wait till Mom and Dad read that because we'll have a lot to discuss. They'll have no problem. Oh, no. Oh, no. He didn't want anybody to find it out. Why? Because he was created for the good, the true, and the beautiful. And he knew he should have not sent that on, and he did anyway. And now people who really love him are going to call him to accountability to raise him up from that place of despair, disease, and destruction and death to become whole and holy so that he can embrace the good, the true, and the beautiful and become the lover he was created to be. There's a lot more to talk about, but I want to get you out of here. If you'll indulge me, I'll talk for about 10 more minutes, but you can leave if you have to. But I wanted to share with you a couple of contemporary examples of what's going on with regard to this, the pornography and what it's doing to us, and really about your brains and how they work. As Jerry was talking, your brains are developing. This came from a drug-free school handout that we got at school, and I thought it was great. It's not what you know, but who you know that matters. Mom and Dad are right. With whom a young person hangs out does make a difference when it comes to making decisions about whether to smoke or drink. And I believe they didn't add and have sexual relations, but I believe that's part of this too. A Maryland study of 4,200 junior high students found that just being around other kids who smoke and drink, just being around them, that's the influence, is a stronger influence than being offered a cigarette or a drink. Do you see, the father of lies isn't going to just jump right in there and say, here's a fifth of, whatever kind of hard liquor. It's going to set you around other people and, oh, well, they're doing it. They're doing it. It's not so bad. I become accustomed to the culture of that. And then 6th, 7th, and 8th graders were 9 times more likely to smoke and 5 times more likely to drink if they had 2 or more friends who smoke and drink. So actually just the influences, and do you see it says friends? It's not people you don't hang around with, it's people you do hang around with. Do you see how powerful our example can be to other people? Either to bring them down to that place of the 4 Ds or bring them up to the place of the good, the true, and the beautiful. And girls were more likely than boys to submit to peer pressure to drink or smoke. And here's another one in terms of the pornography. What will go in your brain eventually comes out in your behavior. If you put bad using stuff in your brain, it will come out in your behavior. And as I said, Ted Bundy said that himself. This came from the Denver Post. It was an article about a flasher. A flasher is somebody who exposes his private parts to, especially to young girls, to get his sexual thrills. And this flasher said that the headline says it all. Former flasher says his arrest prevented violence. Do you see what he was doing? He was conceiving here, and it was coming out in his behavior because he was actually going out and exposing himself to girls. And then what was going to happen with this disordered passion, it was going to turn to violence. And they're talking about rape and they're talking about murder there. And he's saying that it prevented that. Here's the guy. He knows it. He knows the path he was on. And here's another one. I got this out of the Chicago Tribune. My parents, my dad's dead now, but my mom lives there still, and I read the newspaper avidly. And kid porn ringleader gets 30-year term. Kid porn. That means your age and younger young men here. He says, I'm sorry for the children in the picture. He was 33 years old. I was using the pictures so I wouldn't go out and hurt anyone. Disordered passion is conceived here. It will eventually come out in the behavior. This man also was probably relieved that he wasn't convicted of murder, because he's saying as much that he was on the road to that. Okay, so I need to, well, we'll finish up about a little bit more about love and being a lover, and then we're going to just hear quickly the story of Maria Goretti. So you have to cultivate holy ground around you. Don't tell dirty jokes, like Ryan said. Don't listen to these kinds of music. Try this kind of music. Try to keep your brains and minds clean from that. And one of the things you can do is when you go to the grocery store with your mom, or just go there, you go to 7-Eleven and they have a ratty magazine out there. This is what I do. I see the front, and I was just in the grocery store today. There must have been 15 magazines there. I'd say 12 of them showed the veils torn off the sacred of the woman's body. There was not one picture with a man on the cover of it, even though they weren't exclusively female magazines. Not one picture of a man. They all had women in various stages of undress or immodest dress. What's that saying? It's saying, look at me. And then once we get you to look, we're going to get you to buy. And once I get your money, I don't care if you go to hell. Because I have used you for what I wanted from you, and I don't care what happens to you. The message of a user, because it's all about me, not a lover, who it's all about you. So cultivate holy ground around you. All right, I'm going to talk about Maria Goretti. Maria was 11 years, 9 months old when she was brutally stabbed to death by Alessandro Serenelli, who was 20 years old. This is a picture of Maria. And this is a first-class relic of Maria. It comes from her body. I have the paperwork from Rome, and it says, from the body, ex corpore Maria Goretti, VM, Virgin Martyr. And the most common question I was asked is, what part of her body did it come from? Well, about 3 years ago, I was able to visit her shrine. I have some friends in Italy, and I found out because my friend is Italian, who translated it into English, the relics came from her finger area and her rib area. So I don't know which exact part this came from, but it was either the fingers or the ribs. She was brutally stabbed to death, so she was, her body was completely destroyed. And here's her story. She was born in 1890. She died in 1902. She was 11 years, 9 months old when she died. What happened to her? Well, Maria lived with her family in central Italy. This is her father, Luigi. He was 41 years old when he died. They had 6 children. They had just had their 6th child 3 months before he died. They lived a very hard-scrabble existence in central Italy, about an hour away from Rome. They lived really in an area that was very swampy. And so Luigi was bitten by an infected mosquito, and he died. So now Mrs. Goretti is left with 6 children, one of them being an infant, and she has to take care of the home, plus take care of the fields, because they were tenant farmers. The farmers that they raised, the crops that they raised went back to the landowner, and they were able to keep some of them. Yeah? I'm going to get to that. This is the house they lived in. They only lived in 2 rooms up here with a big kitchen right here. Down here, another family lived. This belonged to the tenant farmer. And Mrs. Goretti wasn't able to do all the work of the field, so she knew she had to get in some masculine help. So she invited this man, Mr. Serenelli, and his 20-year-old son to live with them. Now, unbeknownst to her, the Serenellis were alcoholics and pornography addicts. Now, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have all those things then, but since Adam and Eve ate the apple, pornography has been around. And it's mostly focusing on the men's sensitive visual process and presenting women to be used as objects in their unveiled state. The veils have been torn off. And so Mrs. Goretti didn't know that, but these were men, and she needed men to help her. So they ended up staying in the rooms over here, and they shared this common kitchen. Well, Maria was a very beautiful girl, even though she wasn't even 12 years old. And Alessandro started muttering these very vile, vulgar things to her. And that was wrong, and Maria, obviously it was wrong, and Maria really should have gone to tell her mother. But Maria was concerned about her mother because she had all this stuff on her mind, you know, the 6 kids, the farming, and so forth. And so she didn't tell her mother that Alessandro was saying really vulgar things, kind of like that vile email. That's the kind of stuff Alessandro was saying to Maria about using her body and so forth. Well, finally, what was in his mind with the pornography and with muttering these things, now it's going to come out in his behavior. He just couldn't handle it anymore, or so he thought. He was going to rape her. So one day, he had given Maria a shirt to mend, and she was standing on the top, she was sitting on the top of this stairway, and her sister, who was 3 months old, Teresa, was in a basket next to her, and she was mending Alessandro's shirt. Well, Alessandro came the back way and came into the house from the field, and on his way through the kitchen, he grabbed, I thought it was a knife, but I learned when I was at her shrine it was something called a punch. It's about 14 inches long, and it's broad at one end and very narrow and pointed at the other. And it's used to punch holes through straw to make brooms. It's called a punch. And he put that in his waistband. Of course he knew what he was going to do. The violence that these flasher and that porn guy knew was going to come. He was going to stab her. He was going to kill her after he raped her. Why else would he take a weapon like that? And so he opens the door, and here's Maria, not even 12 years old. And she had made her first communion at the age of 10. She wanted to be holy. She was a very simple Italian country girl. But she really wanted to live forever in the place of the good, the true, and the beautiful. And she wanted everybody she met to live there too. And so Alessandro opens the door, and Maria looks up, and she sees him. She sees the punch. She sees the look in her eye. She stands up because she knows what he's going to do, and she pushes him, and she says, "No, no, Alessandro, it's a sin. It's a sin. You'll go to hell." Well, he takes out that punch. He's so enraged, and he stabs her 14 times in the abdomen. Well, she fell down in a bloody heap, and he went into his bedroom and pretended he was asleep. Why? Because he wasn't created to be a rapist murderer. He was created also for the good, the true, and the beautiful, and he said, "Non serviam." And he had not been going to confession, and so he had those mirrors up, and imago mei, give me your body, give me those images, because that's what's feeding my passions. One good confession would have taken those mirrors and smashed them to smithereens. Oh no. Alessandro had the mirrors up in front of him. And so the baby started crying. Mrs. Goretti comes in. Mr. Serenelli comes in. There's Maria in a heap on the ground. What do they say? Who did this? And she said, Alessandro did it. Well, they get Maria to the hospital, and the police come to arrest Alessandro. Maria, on the way to the hospital, this not even 12-year-old girl says, "I forgive Alessandro because I want him to live forever with me in heaven." The words of a true lover. It's not all about me. It's not all about him and this penultimate reality. It's all about his ultimate destination. And she was so concerned as she's dying in the ambulance, she says she forgives. So the doctors try to save her life. They couldn't, and on July 6, 1902, she died. Alessandro was convicted, and he was put in jail for 30 years. Because he was not 21, he was 20 when he committed the crime. He could only be sentenced for 30 years in jail instead of a lifetime. And so for 3 years he lived in jail, an unrepentant, non serviam heart. He didn't care he was a rapist, murderer, a pornography addict, an alcoholic, completely unrepentant. Now Maria has said, "I want him to live forever with me in heaven." She has been interceding on his behalf so his soul, his non serviam heart, will turn to a serviam heart. And one night she appeared to him in a vision. She can't force him, just like God can't force us to say serviam. But he can give all the graces necessary to push us to say it, but he'll never force us. So Maria appeared to him in a vision, and she had 14 white flowers, and she presented them to him one by one for each stab wound. And as he received them, they burst into flame. The next day when he woke up, she said nothing. He was completely a changed person, a completely repentant serviam heart. And he lived out the rest of his 27 years of his sentence in prayer and penance. Now, when he was 50 years old, he was released from prison. Now, Santa Goretti, her mother, Maria's mother, is an old woman now, in her 70s. The first thing he did was go to Santa Goretti's house and knock on the door. Now, you can imagine when Santa Goretti opened the door, you'd never forget the face of your child's murderer, no matter how old. And she did not know what had happened to him. He had been locked away. She didn't know. So she opens the door. She sees the face of her daughter's murderer. And he says, Santa Goretti, I have come to beg your forgiveness. And she instantly knew what had happened. And she said, Alessandro Serenelli, if God can forgive you and my Maria can forgive you, who am I not to forgive you? And that is why in 1954, Maria was canonized in 1950, but Alessandro and Santa Goretti can be sitting together in complete and total reconciliation. The mother of the murdered girl and the girl's murderer sitting together in peace in God's peace, the only peace that way they could achieve that peace. Here's Alessandro as an old man. He only died in the 1970s, so he's fairly contemporary. And he wrote a letter. And I never knew about that. He wrote a testimony to young people, especially to young men. And this is all in Italian. And afterwards, if you'd like to read it, you can, because I had it translated by somebody whose relative lived in Italy, and she emailed it to him. And he says, young men, stay away from the things I got into, the pornography, the alcohol, and so forth. It will take you only to one place, which is a place far away from what you were created to be. And I am warning you, as one who has been there, stay away and master those passions so they will not master you. So I'm going to leave the relics, and this is a second-class relic of St. Paul. It comes from the column upon which he was beheaded. The first-class relics come from the body or the bone of the saint. The second-class relics come from something that was related to them, maybe some clothing, maybe something else. And a third-class relic, as I said, is a holy object touched to a first or second-class relic. This comes from the column upon which he was beheaded. He was a Roman citizen and could not be crucified. So he was beheaded, and this is a little piece of marble from the column. And you may want to, dads bless your sons, sons bless your dads, and just ask them to help you to be the lovers you were created to be, and to be able to know those situations beforehand so you can avoid them, and you can be the kind of person that somebody at your wedding will say this. When I went to a wedding a couple years ago, I heard the most magnificent toast. And I'm sure as I look at all of you, it can be said at your ordinations or at your weddings. And this is how it went. It was very short. The best man said, Zach is my best friend. And I just want to say, everybody who has an encounter with Zach leaves a better person than they were before that encounter. What a magnificent thing to be able to be said about a human being. Everyone leaves me being more good, more true, and more beautiful because of the encounter with me, because I have been able to say serviam and bring God to others as the greatest lover did and showed us. And I leave us with this meditation. Be careful of your thoughts, for your thoughts become your words. Be careful of your words, for your words become your actions. Be careful of your actions, for your actions become your habits. Be careful of your habits, for your habits become your character, user or lover. And be careful of your character, for your character becomes your destiny, the place of despair, disease, destruction, and death, or the place we were all created for, the good, the true, and the beautiful. I wish us all a successful pilgrimage. God bless you.